For most of modern history, murder investigations were driven by crimes of logic. Investigators looked for universal, understandable motives: anger, greed, or revenge, usually carried out between people who knew each other. Because these motives were universal, the math usually added up. Up until the 1960s, police solved over 90% of all homicides in America. Then, the math stopped working. Solve rates plummeted as the serial offender and the stranger killing emerged to shatter the old paradigm. This created an immediate crisis for law enforcement. Investigators struggled to track a killer with no prior relationship to the victim, no missing money, and no obvious reason for the violence to have occurred. Traditional detective work hits a brick wall when motives vanish. To move forward, investigators needed an entirely new way to interpret a crime scene. The answer came from deep underground, at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Agents shifted their focus from physical forensics toward the behavioral evidence left at a scene. Special Agent John Douglas pioneered this methodology based on a single foundational thesis: behavior reflects personality. The process works much like medical science. Just as a doctor diagnoses an illness by recognizing a cluster of physical symptoms, a profiler identifies a killer by analyzing behavioral indicators left during a crime. Douglas and his colleagues formed the Investigative Support Unit. Their primary function was to look at the chaotic aftermath of a violent crime and reverse engineer the mind of the unknown subject who committed it. The methodology relies on a structured framework of inductive reasoning. To be effective, the investigator must mentally become the hunter. The framework starts with a simple question: what exactly took place? Profilers comb through a scene to isolate behaviorally significant anomalies. The Matt Bomber case of the 1950s provides an early look at this principle in practice. Dr. James Brussel studied the bomb placements and the wording of taunting letters. From those patterns, he deduced the perpetrator was a paranoid man with deep family resentment, who would likely be found wearing a double-breasted suit, fully buttoned. When police caught the bomber, he fit the description exactly. Bizarre, highly specific behaviors act as a psychological fingerprint. The more featureless a crime is, the harder it is to solve. Step 2 asks why the crime happened the way it did. Answering that requires a deep understanding of the victim. Consider a case from rural Georgia. A 14-year-old girl was taken from her bus stop and found days later in a wooded area 10 miles away. Douglas found the victim was naive, warm, and highly unlikely to get in a car with a stranger. Knowing she would have resisted the abduction, Douglas could predict how the attacker reacted when his delusional fantasy shattered. Because she unexpectedly fought back, the killer panicked. The murder resulted from a chaotic reaction to a failed plan, rather than a calculated choice. Deciphering the perpetrator's decisions requires establishing profound empathy for the victim. The final step determines who would commit this crime for these reasons. Investigators use the behavioral data to narrow the list of suspects. John Douglas demonstrated this during a prison interview with Charlie Davis, an inmate who had murdered 5 women. Douglas isolated a single behavioral change across Davis's kills. The inmate only covered the face of his final victim. Douglas leveraged this anomaly to accurately predict Davis's relationship issues, financial stress, and the specific guilt that drove him to visit the victim's grave. Confronted with these details, Davis confessed. The resulting profile serves as a precise psychological weapon. It is designed to shatter a suspect's defenses once they are sitting in the interrogation room. Hollywood often misrepresents the job. FBI profilers do not actually catch criminals or make the final arrests. Instead, profilers provide the psychological map and proactive strategies used by local police to execute the legwork in arrests. This advisory role carries massive pressure. An inaccurate profile derails the investigation, giving a predator time to find more victims. The profiler's job is a high-stakes, isolated mental battle where opinions carry life or death consequences. The sheer volume of this work was staggering. At one point, Douglas was managing 150 active serial cases simultaneously, with no backup. The work of profiling carries a profound psychological hazard. Understanding a predator requires forcing yourself to think and feel exactly like one, a process that leads to inescapable mental contamination. Douglas reached his breaking point in Seattle in 1983. While working on the Green River case, he fell into a coma due to a stress-induced brain hemorrhage. His physical collapse was the direct result of carrying the country's worst predators inside his own mind for years. While behavioral profiling changed how we solve the unsolvable, its ultimate cost is paid in the health of the men and women who must step into the dark to bring killers to the light.